Welcome to Reducing Risk, a series of podcasts from Medical Protection created specifically for clinicians in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Reducing Risk looks at key medico-legal issues in our jurisdiction and provides helpful advice and guidance on how to manage those risks. Today we are looking at clinicians posting on social media. Previously, in our last episode, we talked about clinicians posting on social media and seeking clinical advice or discussing patient care or hospital-related matters on social media. So please, if you're interested, tune in to our previous episode. I am joined today by Tim and Adam. Tim is a retired medico-legal advisor and general practitioner, and Adam is a partner at our panel law firm, Watankani. Welcome again to you both.
Hi, Cheyenne.
Thanks, Cheyenne.
So, now we're going to talk about posting publicly as a clinician, including opinions about treatment, criticisms of other professions, promoting your own services. Adam, would you like to start by taking us through some of those areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of those areas where, again, there are some medical council professional standards. And you've mentioned two things, both advertising and just using social media in your private life, essentially. So we're not talking here about necessarily seeking advice from colleagues on a Facebook group, but just your social media presence and how you choose to engage with it. So the council has a lot to say about advertising, and it's when you go and have a read of it, it is remarkably restrictive. There are a lot of rules about what the medical council considers appropriate advertising and what it considers inappropriate. And some of them will be quite surprising to members. One of the things that always strikes me is there is an expectation about the sort of qualifications, for example, that you might record on a web page about yourself, and wanting to really restrict those down to core qualifications like MBCHB and college fellowships. So even arguably things like your postgrad diploma in child health, or the masters you did, or the study you might have done on using a dermoscope won't necessarily pass muster. So if you are putting together a website for a business or for yourself personally, it's a good moment to pause and get some advice. Generally speaking, the medical council isn't out there actively reviewing these things, but if they come to the medical council's attention and run the ruler over them, they will tend to give people the opportunity to make changes rather than start a disciplinary investigation or something like that. It's a relatively forgiving aspect in that respect, that people are given the opportunity to bring themselves back in line with standards, and we not infrequently give advice about the sorts of changes that might need to be made. But if you are, putting in all of that work, you've had to go and get an accountant and think about your insurance and sign a lease or whatever else you're doing, don't forget that your business online presence is something that would benefit from pause, reflection, and advice. The things that might get a bit trickier, or the council might be less tolerant of, are practitioners who, as an aspect of their business, might want to start selling another product or be making claims about things. That can be harder to explain away. So you would want to be particularly careful if you've invented some sort of device or ointment that you want to start advertising. But that sort of commercial activity, you ought to be getting advice from lawyers anyway. It's part of being commercially prudent. But you may want to mention to your commercial lawyers that not only do you want to make sure you comply with the normal sorts of commercial rules that everybody does, you also need to be cautious of your position as a medical professional and the council standards. So that's advertising. There might be other things we can talk about that in terms of detail, but the council also has a standard on use of the internet and electronic communication. It's a relatively short standard. It's more guidance than rules, or quite a bit of just common sense in it about being careful what you put on the internet, which I think everyone could benefit from. Where we tend to see people rubbing up against this statement is that a doctor has, in their private life, put something on the internet that has upset another person. They know you're a doctor, and they make a complaint to the medical council. That tends to be what happens. And what the statement says, and it's a bit vague, it says, be careful when sharing information using social media platforms where it can be accessed by members of the public. Do not disclose information about yourself that might undermine your relationship with patients or that might identify and cause distress to colleagues, patients, and families.
That's really broad.
It's very broad. There's another statement on unprofessionalism or unprofessional conduct, which has some relevant content as well. But maybe taking a step back, the perspective the council has, and I think it's the right perspective, is that when you're a doctor, you're a member of a profession. And that word profession is an important word. It means that your vocation has some special rules around it, which give you both privileges and obligations. There are things doctors can do that other people can't do. Those are the privileges. In terms of the obligations, there are a whole set of rules that go with being a doctor that you will not be subject to if you choose to be a plasterer. And that's not to denigrate the skill or the vocation of plastering, but it's not a profession that has those additional set of rules that then make doctors a protected profession that can do things other people can't do. And part of what goes with that is needing to conduct yourself in a way that meets the public's expectations of you as a professional and that maintains that respect not only for yourself but for all the other members of the profession. So if you start behaving publicly, and publicly includes in an identifiable way on the internet, other colleagues of yours can be impacted by that, because if it erodes the respect and trust that the public have in you as a doctor, that can spill over to a more general lack of respect for the profession. And that's a problem for all doctors because you rely so much on that respect and professionalism to engage with patients, to be trusted, to give advice and have patients follow it, to pick up the phone and talk to a colleague and expect to just be trusted immediately and have conversations where everybody knows that you don't have to be concerned about the fidelity of the person you're talking to. So it is important, and the cases that we've had are where people have political views or personal views that are there's no law against having those views, but they may be minority. Other people may find them offensive, and then putting them out there on the internet in a way that it's either immediately apparent or not too hard with a few clicks to figure out who you are and that you're a doctor. And you will get in trouble if you post offensive material on the internet.
And that's the key, isn't it? We can't use the argument, but I was just posting as a private individual, not as a doctor. The medical council regards us as being a doctor, no matter how we're making those views. So we can't hide behind that. That wasn't in my role as a doctor that I made those comments.
That's
and
right.
So
I mean, it won't be
we're
irrelevant.
always doctors.
It's never irrelevant, the context in which you're posting. Your lawyer will always say people are entitled to personal opinions and a private life, but at the highest level, if you are facing a charge of professional misconduct, you can be found guilty either for negligence or malpractice, which is what you do while you've got your doctor hat on, but you can also be found guilty for just simply bringing discredit to the profession. And you can bring discredit to the profession for things you do in your private life.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
So would it go to the extent, Adam, of, so you'd been on holiday, you'd indulged in some activities that, maybe the rest of the profession wouldn't think was becoming of a doctor, and then you publish your holiday snaps on some kind of platform, just under your own name or under your pet name or whatever it might be, that potentially could get you into trouble with the medical council? Potentially,
depend what the photos are,
yes,
and I hesitate to speculate on that. But yes, the clearest cases where we've got good precedent tend to have arisen during COVID, where some people were saying things on their private Facebook pages that there were some quite offensive elements to what was being said, perhaps some views being expressed that were racist, or saying things about other people and judging their choices in very condemnatory ways. And there were a number of health practitioners, and I say that more widely than just doctors, who were found guilty under the Health Practitioners Competence Assurance Act for things they put online during COVID times. So we know that the threshold can be met for discipline, for sure. The cases that are less clear-cut, they're still very challenging to be taken through that sort of process. It could be a poor taste joke at a conference.
That's
or having been part of some sort of group chat on the internet and not realizing how accessible that is, and you're expressing views that might be fine in an intimate setting with friends that are bit off-colour jokes or what have you, but because they're memorialised on the internet and strangers can read them and they can figure out that you're a doctor, the medical council may well be interested in that conduct. And I think it's much like in the last episode we talked about, if you're putting something in writing, pause for a moment and think, would I be okay with other people reading this? If I'm posting something on Facebook or whatever it is, if for some reason somebody screenshotted this and sent it to the medical council, would I be embarrassed by it? Would I be okay with them reading it? Or would I be saying quietly to myself, gosh, I'm a bit uncomfortable with them having to have read that because it doesn't reflect well. And there's definitely a perspective, and it's a valid view to have that doctors and other healthcare professionals also need to have parts of their lives that are not.
That's right.
Constantly under Saramon's eye of the medical council, but when you join the profession, there's a baseline level of standard that you have to observe in order not to bring discredit or not to erode the public's trust in doctors.
Yeah, so it seems to me that it is rather risky, social media, because the complaints can come from anywhere, right? Your colleagues, someone from the public who's just taken offence to what you've written, taken it out of context, misunderstood, then it can end up as a complaint.
It is. There's definitely some risk that goes with using social media, but times have moved on. Social media, for some people, is a really valid and important part of their lives. I don't think that we should be saying to people, don't use social media. I think that's, for some people, that's how they want to engage with the world. But what we do need to say as advisors is that you, step one, have a read of the relevant statements. This one on the use of the internet and electronic communication, and the other one on unprofessional conduct. It's a good moment to pause and go and see what they say, and then armed with that knowledge, bring a little bit of prudence and caution to what you write on the internet if it's going to be able to be viewed by the public. There will be different social media apps and things which are much more intimate and private, and you can have a high degree of confidence that the only people you're communicating with are trusted friends. There'll be a sliding scale. How you're expected to conduct yourself in that context will be different from an open Facebook page, for example.
But I think it's fair to say that if it does come to the attention of the medical council, then if they form the view that this really is, well beyond what is expected of a doctor as a professional, then the consequences can be quite significant, can't they? And there's certainly been a number of cases, as you mentioned, in front of the Health Practitioners Disciplinary Tribunal, the HPDT.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So, step one is referral to a professional conduct committee to investigate further and decide what to do. If it's a one-off, you would hope that if you're well represented, you might persuade a PCC that it's not something that needs to be taken to the next stage of bringing a disciplinary charge. But that option's there depending on the gravity of what it is that's being put on the internet. If you have... and I'm not suggesting this is common, but if someone were to express sort of abhorrent racist views on Facebook, or say, I don't, I can't trust the doctors in my team from XYZ country, then yes, I think you probably are looking at a charge.
And in that case too, it's not just the HPDT, but the Human Rights Review Tribunal that could have an interest on racist matters.
Yeah. I mean, I think your primary legal concern would be the Health Practitioners Disciplinary Tribunal, but you're right, Tim. There are other ways of getting in trouble. There's always more than one. But I would be worried about being suspended or having conditions put on my practice, that sort of thing.
And so what would they do? Do they go through and look at all your posts, or do they just focus on the complaint?
In my experience, having assisted members, often it will just be one post that's brought to the medical council's attention. Somebody's seen something that's pushed their buttons and they've said, I saw this on the internet and I've figured out that this person's a doctor. How is this okay? Even before the doctor is asked to provide a response, the medical council staff may well have taken the opportunity to go and see what else is publicly viewable and capture that, so that if there are other comments, you may be called to account for those as well.
Gosh.
So even if you decide in retrospect, well, better delete those, it may be too late. The council may already have them.
That is right. It may be too late. Not necessarily, but it is a possibility that you will be asked to provide an explanation for comments beyond the one thing that brought you initially to the council's attention.
Right. And that will include opinions that you share about other professions, right? So like you were saying, if a doctor said on their personal post, for example, on X or Instagram, that they wouldn't trust acupuncturists at all. They cause so many complications. An acupuncturist can take offence and report them to medical council. And medical council could look through all their previous posts to see if they've previously made comments about acupuncturists.
Yeah, potentially. And that would be one of those trickier cases where someone might say, well, that is my experience. I'm not trying to be offensive, etc. And there may be a real debate about that. But at a minimum, I think you would end up with what is called an educational letter from the council to say, you're coming close to the line and we strongly recommend that you are cautious in the future with how you publish your views about things online. Another interesting topic that's in the news at the moment, and this is a bit tangential, but there are also public service rules that apply if you're an employee of Te Whatu Ora.
Yes.
And so this is from an employment perspective. If you're going to be giving an interview to One News being critical of the government, for example, that's something you might want to get some advice about first and have a think about. It's not necessarily prohibited. It's quite a complicated area of law, but you do have obligations in terms of how you conduct yourself as an employee of the government when then participating in public-facing politics. And at the moment, there's some action in that space, in that the current government seems to be trying to make it more difficult for doctors to
express a negative view.
Express views with their doctor hat on about matters of public policy. So that's another thing to be mindful of.
Absolutely. Well, we could talk about that for ages.
We could, but I might get into a similar sort of problem about expressing views that get me into trouble.
Yes, your wording was very careful.
Yes. Okay, well, let's look at, something that we're commonly contacted about at MPS is patients who have posted very negative reviews about the services they've received from doctors. And often doctors are saying, what can I do to remove the review or get them to retract it? Or is there any recommendation? Because often what they say to us is they've contacted Google to try and get the review removed, but they're just met with a checklist, and if it's not an issue on one of the points on the checklist, then they don't remove it, or they don't take any further action. So, Tim, can you think of any cases where members have had negative reviews and we've assisted?
Yes, well, certainly one comes to mind, which was more than a negative review. It was a defamatory and very defamatory comment, which had a significant impact on the doctor concerned. We actively pursued that. And in the end, the internet provider gave some support to the individual without acknowledging responsibility in a legal sense, but clearly acknowledging that this was a significant issue for that doctor, and helped the doctor with a method for ensuring that if this particular defamatory post appeared again, that they had some way of checking and getting rid of it quickly through the mechanisms with the internet provider. So it was a long drawn-out case, but it ended up being a satisfactory outcome. Not ideal, but a satisfactory outcome for the doctor. So we certainly take it seriously, but the lower level ones are so difficult to deal with. There was a tragic case of a doctor who had seen a woman who ended up having meningitis and died, and her friends then posted all kinds of really nasty comments about that doctor. And they weren't, to the defamatory level, but they were really nasty, and trying to actually deal with them, because if you engage, then often that just ups the ante and ramps up the feeling. Often unsatisfactorily, the advice would end up being, look, I'm sorry, you just got to kind of wear that, and it'll eventually die down and it won't be an issue anymore. But that's not great advice to be giving. And, from a legal perspective, to take legal action, that's quite a big step. You really don't want to engage the big guns, or we engage them in terms of getting advice, but engaging in terms of a lawyer's letter or whatever, that's quite a big step to take. So,
yeah, and I can imagine that medical counsel would take issue if you're having a to and fro with a patient posting reviews on a public review page. I think they would take issue with that.
Well, all the things that we've talked about up until now would apply to that if you're doing it publicly. Obviously, if you're doing it privately, if you can find out how to get that individual's details. But you're right. Mostly it would be through a public forum, so that would be challenging.
Yeah. So we've also given that advice when we get this question, is that we suggest if it's relatively low level and if it's like the patient's expressing dissatisfaction, we've suggested wording that is very neutral, like, please contact our practice so that we can address your concerns, as a starting point, without giving out any information on the patient. But if it is defamatory and we do need to escalate, do you have some advice for our members, for our doctors, Adam?
Yeah, it is a hard area. Often reviews will be hosted overseas. It can be very difficult dealing with the different entities that are hosting those sorts of comments. It's not easy to get stuff taken down. And as you've said, there's the potential to escalate things and just make matters worse, etc. So it's a hard area to help doctors with, because sometimes you do feel a bit powerless. If someone is defamed, we do have rules for that. No one would never encourage someone down the defamation route lightly, because it's difficult, it's drawn out. But you can assert a doctor's rights, even just to try and, as a encouragement, to try and get something taken down rather than going and trying to seek compensation. There's also the possibility of, and it depends a lot on the context of what's been posted and how it's been posted, the Harmful Digital Communications Act. So you can make a complaint to NetSafe. They can try and work with parties to have information taken down. And once it's gone through that process, if it hasn't resolved the issue, there is the option of applying to the district court for an order. Obviously, you'd have to meet the threshold. And if it's just a dissatisfied customer with a banal review, you're probably not, it's not going to be a route open to you. But if it is offensive or threatening or harassing, if it crosses that sort of line, you might have a remedy under that legislation. Sometimes you get patients who really do become very fixated, and they might be both posting reviews but also trying to contact you in other ways, or you're letting it be known that they know where you live, that kind of thing.
And we've had members who said that, they've posted things like, I know where your children go to school, significantly threatening.
Yes. And so, not only would the Harmful Digital Communications Act probably become engaged at that level, but both MPS and us as the panel law firm can provide advice about what to do in that situation. And in rare cases, we have even gone to court to seek orders under the Harassment Act, so that there's a very clear set of boundaries placed on the former patient, usually a former patient by that stage, that if they transgress, the police won't need to muck around. They can go and get involved to protect you. So there are things we can do, but just plain old poor customer feedback, you probably have to live with. It'd be really interesting to get someone to take a look at how commonly in New Zealand that sort of stuff is looked at, or people pay attention to it. We're not in an environment where there's a great degree of customer choice, particularly really in anywhere. You're not. It's not like if you see a bad review about your GP, you're going to be able to just enroll in another practice or necessarily get an appointment with someone else. So I think sometimes the remedy is for the doctor actually doing a bit of work about being okay with that. Accessing a EAP, or dealing with the fact that that's infuriating, or affects their mana, or makes people who often hold themselves to a really high standard have big feelings about that. It's a completely different way of dealing with the problem, but it might be helpful in some cases to just be able to be at peace with the fact that you're not going to please all of the people all of the time.
That's right.
And that's often the hard bit, though, is because often the criticisms are actually really unfair, and they don't reflect what really happened, and there's all kinds of other stuff going on. And although the consequences in terms of what's not going to go to the medical council or the HDC, but the personal impact of it is actually really hard to deal with. So if you really find that you're still thinking about it 3 weeks afterwards, and it's still waking up in the middle of the night and saying, oh no, that review's really getting to me, then getting professional advice on how to manage the feelings as opposed to how to manage the posting is a key.
Yeah. Wow, we've covered a lot in our last couple of podcasts. Do either of you have any final comments?
Just in terms of the patient's complaints or negative postings, sadly it does seem that patient dissatisfaction overall is increasing, and there are a lot of factors around that: increased expectations, reduced provision of services because of shortages. So I think it's really important for clinicians to recognise that this is something that's going to happen more frequently, and it just like getting a complaint. We're all going to get complaints in our lifetime, and we just got to have an expectation that that'll happen, as opposed to, oh my God, that's terrible kind of response. And that can help deal with the impacts.
And if it's a patient dissatisfaction review, you're not going to do anything about it. Perhaps don't read it in detail. Just
try and ignore it as much as possible, which is impossible, of course.
That's right.
Yeah, it's funny how we react much more to the negative comments than we do to the positive comments.
Absolutely. Did you have any final comments for our listeners?
Well, people will be bored of hearing it from me, but look, a problem shared is a problem halved. I would just encourage people to call MPS, and what might be a difficult conversation with the doctor in the next door room, because you know them and have to work with them every day, is sometimes easier to have on the phone with someone who's whose role is there to listen to you and has probably had to provide advice on a similar issue before and has got pathways for providing help. So don't suffer in silence. Reach out, because there are ways we can help, and even if it's that you've had a notification because you have put something on the internet that you regret, it's not necessarily the end of the world, but it is an appropriate moment to be assisted in terms of how you then respond to the council responsibly.
Okay, thank you both for joining me today, and thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope it's been helpful. Our podcasts provide information of a general nature. If you would like advice on a specific case and you are our member, please contact us on 0800 22 55 677 option 3 or 0800 call MPS option 3 during business hours. We look forward to catching up with you in our next podcast. If you like the Medical Protection podcasts, please subscribe and leave a review. If you would like a podcast on a specific topic, please email nzpodcasts@medicalprotection.org.